if menstruation and perimenopause and menopause were not so energetically powerful, we would not be in a situation where we feel shame or oppression or that there is a feeling of isolation. Because these are the very things that come about when there's something powerful that people fear. So this actual conversation right now is going to be about menopause and sexual interest, because it's really important to understand that not all women that are losing their sexual interest in this age are actually losing this interest because of their age, okay? So let's backtrack a little bit and understand the average woman as she was growing up was in some way probably oppressed in some way. She was probably hearing things like, oh, you throw like a girl to anybody, and throwing like a girl was a negative, or saying the word bitch, or um, any number of the words that are used that are female focused that are meant as derogatory. So she's grown up with this. She's grown up with having a sense of being an object, that women are just sexual objects. So it's great and wonderful to see breasts and a pelvic floor in a sexual way, but God forbid the woman is breastfeeding or menstruating, then all of a sudden she's dirty or all of a sudden she's less than. So her worth is sometimes connected to society, to her level of what she can give sexually. And anything else would be seen as derogatory. So I wanted to bring all of that up because even if a woman has not had abuse or neglect or trauma in any way, shape, or form, she still has grown up with this, okay? Even in the best of homes, even in the homes where equality was alive and well, society, you cannot cocoon someone from society. And society has dictated that all of things that are female in many ways, shapes, and forms are negative. So let's go into now sexual interest. Let's fast forward to here's a woman who, whether she is heterosexual or homosexual, she may be in her 30s, 40s, or 50s and finding herself not very aroused by her partner, or maybe any partner. And yes, it could be hormonal imbalance, but probably not. And in fact, what came first, the chicken or the egg? If there's a hormonal imbalance, was it there first because there was stress? Because stress affects your hormones. So regardless, we still need to address the stress and the feelings that are going along with the hormonal imbalance, even if there is one. So let's just take, for example, we have a woman now who has no interest or very little interest, and she's starting to feel resentful, and she's starting to exhibit behaviors like taking a longer shower, or pretending she's sleeping, or just outright avoiding it and telling the other person that she's not interested. What are some of the reasons why a woman might not have interest? Well, she could be with a jerk. So that's the number one thing, okay? You may not have interest sexually because you're with a jerk, okay? So you need to change that. So that's one true reason why someone would not have sexual interest. If you've had a relationship where the person has been negative towards you, whether or not it was malicious, whether there is abuse or emotional abuse also tied into this, or just lots of ongoing stress, what can happen is your oxytocin levels will lower, because oxytocin is that hormone that creates love. We call it the love drug, or actual trust. Now let me back up a little bit here and give you a really good example of something that we see in humans. Think back to high school days and you heard someone saying, oh, I went on a date and he was all over me like an octopus, like he just kept touching me. Well, men are sort of wired to do that when they're mating or trying to mate, because if you touch a woman often enough, she starts to have a pseudo trust for you. So it takes about 7 times that you would maybe touch someone and they start to let their defenses down. Now that's just in the early stages of mating, but in a relationship, you would assume that there's already trust built. But if you have a couple that say they're not sleeping together and they're not sleeping in their own bed, maybe, so they're sleeping in two different situations, maybe one's on the couch, one's in bed, because they're having some kind of a struggle in their relationship. Over time, they're both going to have an oxytocin drop. So yeah, one might be saying that they want to have intimacy more, but the bottom line is that's more of a biological kind of urge rather than an emotional urge sometimes. So to get yourself more intimate with your partner, the number one thing is first sleep together in the same bed. So even if you're having struggles, you know what? You still love the person, and the struggles should not define the relationship. So the relationship, love, and trust should be there. And if there's a trust issue, then at least the love should be there. So definitely let love be the more definitive reason why you're together. And struggles happen, ups and downs happen in relationships, and that's just the way it is. But stay in the same bed. Try to cuddle as much as possible, and try to touch each other lovingly as much as possible. Now, one of the other things that often I see is that women will not feel good about themselves. So if they've gained weight or they some way feel less than in any way, shape, or form, especially in midlife when estrogen can be a little bit more dominant and there could be some different hormone issues coming into play, sometimes what happens is it's lifestyle or hormones or a little bit of both or just stress. And what happens there is you start to not feel good and you start to avoid your partner because you feel ashamed of how you look. So there is a situation where you really need to focus on being happy in your own skin. If you're not happy at a size 14 or 24 or 3X, you're not going to be happy at a size 4. And if weight is defining your happiness, then you have a very big problem and you definitely need therapy because your weight should not define who you are or your happiness. So I want you to think about how you project yourself to others. So when you're in midlife, if you're menopausal, especially, how are you projecting yourself? Are you projecting yourself like someone who loves themselves and is comfortable in their own skin or not? That is going to also tell you if you're comfortable with yourself intimately to be with your partner. So if you have a loss of sex drive, maybe it's because you just have a loss of love for yourself. That is huge, and I know it sounds too simple, but it's really there. Now, let's go to what if we had abuse in our childhood? What if there was something really negative happening? What if there was neglect? And it doesn't always have to be sexual. It can be just mom was really busy working a lot and you didn't get enough attention. It could be that you felt like you were shuffled around. Maybe you traveled a lot and you felt like you never connected to your parents enough because they were busy making a life and making sure that you were taken care of. It's possible that it could come from trauma, abuse, or just kind of indirect neglect. And not all of abuse or neglect is malicious. Most of it is, but much of it's not as well. So either way, what happens in midlife is you kind of breathe, okay? So you go through and you're going through your 20s and 30s and you're working in your 40s and maybe even now 40s and 50s you might still be really working hard, but you're reflecting more because you notice the changes that are happening and you reflect a lot more and you feel wiser and you think about your past. And in your past, there might have been something really bad. There could have been trauma or just feelings that are coming up. When traumas, triggers, feelings, emotions surface in midlife, it makes us take a step back and it makes us want to retreat into that child place again. And when you retreat into this child place that you're not going to recognize as a child place, when you retreat into that, you start to lose the adult passions that you might have had. So you might even lose the passion for doing anything with your partner, much less intimacy. So you have to think about that as well, that it can be really heart-wrenching to be in that situation. And sometimes when you feel a loss of sexual desire, it's a part of you that you need to get in touch with again. You are a beautiful female and a physical being, and it's very, very important to be in touch with your feminine side. So going back to the shame that sometimes we have about menstruation or perimenopause, let's think about perimenopause and menopause right now. What is told to you? What is your idea or your philosophy of the stage of your life? It might be that you assume that you're going to be matronly and unattractive, or that all older women gain weight, or that it's harder to be attractive when you're older. And I say that's not true. I think that as women age, depending on how you were raised, you're also going to have different ideas. But I think as women age, we become so much more in touch with who we are if we do not let intellect and worry get in the way. If we get to that intuitive part of ourselves, we can connect to our feminine side. And when we connect to our feminine side, we become more desirable and we desire more. So that's very important to understand, is that sometimes just connecting to who we are and our own life purpose is very important. And in midlife, again, we take that breather and we reflect, but we can reflect upon all of the very good things that have happened in our lives. We can reflect upon the trials and the tribulations, and we can embrace them. Now, also what happens in midlife is we become a little less patient if we've had a lot of stress. When we have stress, it's almost like our bodies are being dictated by our adrenal glands and our cortisol levels. So we have these hormones that are pulsating through our body, and they're almost putting a stop. It's almost like they're eating up the oxytocin and the serotonin. So what happens to our bodies then is we're running on stress. And when you're running on stress, imagine you're running away from a dinosaur. Are you thinking about someone kissing your neck? Absolutely not. You're thinking about somebody biting your neck and snapping it and eating your head for like a treat. So when you are stressed, regardless of what the stress is, you're going to not think about desire, because you're wired to, when you are under stress, to not think about desire. You're taught and also wired to focus on the stress, solution, measurable outcomes, find an answer, feel better, get unstuck. That's what you're focused on. You're not focused on a romantic dinner when you're really stressed out. You may want the romantic dinner, and you may want the kiss on the neck. You may want someone to gaze into your eyes. But what you're going to do in stress and what you kind of want in the back of your head are two very different things. So lowering your stress levels is key to getting your desire back. So how can you do that? You can meditate. You can learn to actually manage the stress in your life. You can't always get rid of it, but you can manage it. You can put it in chunks and compartmentalize. And some of it you will be able to eliminate. The other thing that you can do is you can exercise more. When you exercise more, and when you, even if you've never exercised, if you start exercising, it's going to actually lower the FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. It's going to lower that a little bit, and that's going to help you to feel better, because your body is still creating estrogen. So when people say, oh, I'm in menopause, I don't have estrogen anymore, that's impossible. Your adrenal glands are still creating estrogen for you. Estrogen is going to give you that feeling of being able to be in love too. That's one of the chemicals. And so when you know that your adrenal glands have a choice of lots of cortisol or more estrogen, you're going to work at lowering your stress levels by exercising, meditating, praying, getting in touch with your true passions. Maybe you love to watercolor, maybe you love to garden. Even if you love to garden and you live somewhere that's really cold, garden indoors a little bit. Have small gardens. Find ways of creating your life. Don't just allow society to dictate who you are or what you should be. So whether it is shame-based types of attitudes towards your menstruation or your menopause, or what you love to do, don't let all the noise outside of you affect you. Go with your intuition, find your energy and your purpose. So if you get anything out of this conversation that I've had with you, this communication, I would love for you to just find yourself and find your purpose and to not have any shame about any stage that you're in, whether you're new to menstruating, in perimenopause, or in or postmenopausal. So accept yourself as you are, find your purpose, find your own passion, and grab that sexual desire back again because it's yours to own.